scarcely imagine southern Italy without tomato sauce. Still, I didn't grasp that such biological transplants might have played a role beyond the dinner plate until in a used bookstore I came across a paperback, Ecological Imperialism by Alfred W. Crosby, a geographer and historian then at the University of Texas. Wondering what the title could refer to, I picked up the book. The first sentence seemed to jump off the page. European emigrants and their descendants are all over the place, which requires explanation. I understood exactly what Crosby was getting at. Most Africans live in Africa, most Asians in Asia, and most Native Americans in the Americas. People of European descent, by contrast, are thick on the ground in Australia, the Americas, and southern Africa. Successful transplants, they form the majority in many of those places. An obvious fact, but one I had never really thought about before. Now I wondered, why is that the case? Ecologically speaking, it is just as much a puzzle as tomatoes in Ukraine. Before Crosby and some of his colleagues looked into the matter, historians tended to explain Europe's spread across the globe almost entirely in terms of European superiority, social or scientific. Crosby proposed another explanation in Ecological Imperialism. Europe frequently had better trained troops and more advanced weaponry than its adversaries, he agreed, but in the long run, its critical advantage was biological, not technological. The ships that sailed across the Atlantic carried not only human beings, but plants and animals, sometimes intentionally, sometimes accidentally. After Columbus, ecosystems that had been separate for eons suddenly met and mixed in a process Crosby called, as he had titled his previous book, the Columbian Exchange. The exchange took corn, maize, to Africa and sweet potatoes to East Asia, horses and apples to the Americas, and rhubarb and eucalyptus to Europe, and also swapped about a host of less familiar organisms like insects, grasses, bacteria, and viruses. The Columbian Exchange was neither fully controlled nor understood by its participants, but it allowed Europeans to transform much of the Americas, Asia, and to a lesser extent Africa into ecological versions of Europe, landscapes the foreigners could use more comfortably than could their original inhabitants. This ecological imperialism, Crosby argued, provided the British, French, Dutch, Portuguese, and Spanish with the consistent edge needed to win their empires. Crosby's books were constitutive documents in a new discipline, environmental history. The same period witnessed the rise of another discipline, Atlantic studies, which stressed the importance of interactions among the cultures bordering that ocean. Recently, a number of Atlanticists have added movements across the Pacific to their purview. The field may have to be renamed. Taken together, researchers in all these fields have been assembling what amounts to a new picture of the origins of our world-spanning, interconnected civilization, the way of life evoked by the term globalization. One way to summarize their efforts might be to say that to the history of kings and queens most of us learned as students has been added a recognition of the remarkable role of exchange, both ecological and economic. Another way might be to say that there is a growing recognition that Columbus's voyage did not mark the discovery of a new world, but its creation. How that world was created is the subject of this book. The research has been greatly aided by recently developed scientific tools. Satellites map out environmental changes wreaked by the huge, largely hidden trade in latex, the main ingredient in natural rubber. Geneticists use DNA assays to trace the ruinous path of potato blight. Ecologists employ mathematical simulations to simulate the spread of malaria in Europe, and so on. The examples are legion. Political changes, too, have helped. To cite one of special importance to this book, it is much easier to work in China nowadays than it was in the early 1980s when Crosby was researching ecological imperialism. Today, bureaucratic suspicion is minimal. The chief obstacle I faced during my visits to Beijing was the abominable traffic. Librarians and researchers there happily gave me early Chinese records, digital scans of the originals, which they let me copy.